Subject this morning, Kriya Yoga and the future of the world. Let us discuss first, say a few words about Kriya Yoga. According to the Master's words, Kriya Yoga is the fastest spiritual accelerator known to man. And that's why the world needs Kriya Yoga. The world needs to be spiritually accelerated without question of a doubt. The practice of Kriya Yoga enables the faithful devotee to increase his spiritual evolution, that he may be rid of the sufferings of the threefold nature of each and every one of us. Not just free from the sufferings of the human aspect, but the spiritual body within us, and finally the causal body. In other words, the threefold nature of man, body, mind, and soul, needs to be freed from that which causes the suffering, and that is, of course, delusion. The delusion that this world is the reality, this dream of God is the reality, and attachment of our soul, which is none other than God within us, to that attachment, to that dream, is the cause of all our suffering. So Patanjali said, get rid forever of the cause of suffering by tearing it out by the roots. In other words, get rid of the idea that we are this body, this little body, subject to its limitations and subject to the laws of this drama of life. So he said, get rid of it, but get rid of it forever by tearing it out by the root, breaking the idea that we are separated from God, realizing through the practice of Kriya Yoga that we are not this body, but the presence of God within us, God the Father. Now, Kriya Yoga will give you God communion, God contact. And that's what we want. That's what the world needs. The world has not had that. And so there is suffering in the world. There is lack of lasting peace. Kriya Yoga will lift each one, and every one taken together constitutes the world. You've got to change not outward conditions, you've got to change the component parts, haven't you, of this world to bring lasting peace? And taking on a matter of consciousness, who makes up the component parts? Each and every one of us. We have to be changed. Then lasting peace will come in the world. So Kriya Yoga is a great spiritual accelerator, as the Master has said. Now comes the question, how does it work? How does this Kriya Yoga work? Well, Kriya Yoga works by speeding up the spiritual evolution and freeing the soul. Freeing the soul from attachment, as I have said, to this world and these conditions, and, in other words, eliminating the ego. The ego is the rascal. The ego is the thing that keeps us tied to this dream of delusion. Kriya Yoga will eliminate him if it is practiced, because it increases spiritual evolution in a scientific way, and I haven't time, of course, to go into the exact way it works, except to say this, that in time, as evolution goes on, we will be freed, more or less, from attachment to this dream. But the ancient yogis found out that they could do that right now by these definite spiritual techniques which are in God's hands. He has given them to the world. They have been hidden throughout the different cycles. They come out, then they go back. And this Kriya Yoga is very ancient, and it has been hidden. Now it is coming forth that all who will may avail themselves of its use. So, as I have said, it speeds up evolution and in that way frees the soul. Now, just briefly, if you do what is called one complete Kriya Yoga, made up of 14 definite Kriyas plus 2 Mahamudras and 3 Yodi Mudras. You needn't mind the names, those of you who are not familiar with them. If you do that, it takes 5 minutes. That's all. But your evolution is increased 12 years if it is done with attention. Now you can read for 112 years, and you will not get as much spiritual evolution as you will from doing one Kriya, because it is scientific, and it takes the life force from attachment to this little narrow body, small body, which keeps us deluded. It takes that, allows it to go in the spine and the brain where God and his angels dwell. Now, the angels of God are those rays of his great eternal light, which constitute, in our particular case, the masters, Jesus, Babaji, Larry, Master, Sir, Tesraji, and our beloved Master. They are there in that consciousness. Now, if we can get into that consciousness, you can see that they, having that spiritual realization, can help us. But if we keep an outward consciousness, how can they help us? It's impossible for them to do so. But if by Kriya Yoga we free the life force from attachment to the body, it automatically flows back with our consciousness into the realm of the spine and brain, where we read in Revelation about the golden candlesticks. That's the concentration of spiritual energy within us, where God and those angels I have spoken of dwell. Now, if we can get in there, we can increase our spiritual evolution without question of a doubt, and that's what Kriya does. It takes 5 minutes. You get 12 years of spiritual evolution. And you take 1 hour a day, half an hour in the morning, half an hour at night, 1 hour. You get 144 years of spiritual evolution, if it's done right. That's why the saints and those great ones know so much, can give it, because they've contacted God within them, in the spine, in the brain, as the holy vibration, by the help of those rays of spiritual energy which God has sent. 144 years, imagine it, for 1 hour's practice of Kriya. And going on 1 hour a day for 1 year. 50,000 years, over 50,000 years of spiritual evolution. Doesn't seem possible. But that's where the soul resides. That's where the power of God is. If you get in there and merge in it, you become like God, do you not? So Kriya Yoga is a wonderful thing. Now, let us practice that for 20 years. 1 hour a day, that's not too much. To be free forever from this delusion into the omniscience of God, all right, if you do that for 1 hour a day for 20 years, you say goodbye, ego. You are finished. 1 million years, over 1 million years of evolution, spiritual evolution, it takes that long to get the ego out, normally. Imagine it. How the attachment is so great, how God has suggested this dream so strongly. It takes 1 million years to get rid of that idea that you are separated from God. 1 million years of ordinary spiritual evolution, it takes 20 years only. 20 years only, by the correct practice of Kriya Yoga, to eliminate the ego and be free, a free soul in the light of God. Now, isn't that worth it? Don't you think the world needs that? You and I surely need it. Now, going on just a little bit more about Kriya, then we will take up the second part. Kriya Yoga, as I have said, withdraws the life force, magnetizes the spine, and there is the key. It arouses the soul's power within you. You see the wisdom of the saints. That just doesn't happen. But each and every one of us has that same potential power that the saints have, Jesus and the great ones. We have to arouse it, that's all. Kriya Yoga does that. It arouses the soul's power so that the evolution, spiritual evolution, is tremendously increased and the soul is freed from attachment to the body. Now, I haven't time to go into the science of it. Sometime perhaps I will, but those are the main facts. So you can see Kriya Yoga is important. Now let us take up the second part of our little talk this morning as to the future of the world. Future of the world. Many efforts have been made to bring about lasting peace in this world of ours. From going back through history, nations have made treaties with other nations, and they've made treaties with other nations, and what's the result? War. Fighting all the time. Why? All right, then they got together and they said, well, let's see if we can make a united effort, like the United Nations and such things. Let's have a concentrated effort of all of us to bring peace on earth. What's the result? Fighting, wars. Then you remember back there was a time in President Coolidge's time when there was a talk of disarmament, I think it was, and they wanted to get rid of the battleships and those great big engines of war. And I remember the master went and talked to President Coolidge, and he said, don't you think, sir, that if they take away the battleships and do away with those, don't you think the men will fight just the same with their fists and their hands and stones and sticks? He says, you're right. So you see, those things will not do it. Now, in our time, we have a definite effort to do away with the atom bomb and atomic weapons. Well, one thing we must not forget is this. They have always left out the important thing, and that is God. They've left him out. They're trying to do it by outward means. It's better than nothing, perhaps, but there will be no lasting peace until God has made the first thing. Then there will be. Now, many of these things are tried in the name of God, but that is quite different from the effort of humanity to really know God by being in his name. That's the important thing. I love you, a certain person, as so-and-so. So I'm doing what I do for you in the name of you. But if I merge and mix and become one with you as an entity, a ray of God's consciousness, that's different. That's taking things really in God's name. So when people learn to merge in the name of God, which is what? The holy vibration. His presence in us is the holy vibration. When they do that, then they will be changed. Then the hearts of men will be changed without question of a doubt. Having changed the hearts of men, then there can be lasting peace. Not until. When you have God communion through the practice of Kriya Yoga, then you will feel yourself one with others because you realize the one great light of God from which all things have come, and each and every one of us is a ray of that great light of God. Now, seeing and knowing that, can you hate a brother? No. Then the heart is changed. The heart is changed by the power of God. And when the heart is changed, then lasting peace will come. And only when the hearts of men are changed by God contact, and up to the present time the fastest way is by Kriya Yoga. When the hearts of men are changed, then there will be lasting peace, and the world will be a better place in which to live. Lasting peace will come, as I have said, only when God contact is attained. That changes us. And the brotherhood of man will come only when we see each and every one of our neighbors, as God says, as a part of his one great light, one common Father. Then we can have the brotherhood of man. The Master has said, self-realization comes to establish the temples of God in the souls of men. And Kriya Yoga is a scientific way to bring about the conscious attunement with God's presence in us. Without question of a doubt, it will do that. That's the key point. And so all efforts for peace in the world must be built around that one thing. They have tried it for ages the other way. It doesn't work. God has been left out. Now they must take God first. And as Jesus said, all other things shall be added unto you. Now just a little more about Kriya, and then we'll be through. Kriya for a long, long time was reserved for the priests and those who fully renounced the world and lived as renunciates. But now in our time, through the efforts of the line of masters of self-realization, it has come out and is made available for all in general. But this Kriya was the same millenniums ago. It is the same Kriya that Babaji gave to Arjuna that you read about in the Bhagavad Gita. And it has been handed down. It is the same Kriya which Babaji gave to Lord Shankara, and in the Middle Ages to the Saint Kabir. And then down more toward our time, Christ knew, of course, about the Kriya, Patanjali, St. John, St. Paul. The evidences of their sayings point that out. St. Paul said, I die daily. Do Kriya and you die daily to outward consciousness. Many things point out that they knew this very ancient but very sacred and important technique which gives you God contact if you do it. Now in our own time, Babaji, the same Babaji, who was Krishna, gave this Kriya Yoga to Larry Maharshi, 1861. He handed it down, so to speak, to Sri Yukteswarji in, I believe, 1893, and finally the Master brought it to America in 1920. And by his great effort, by his sacrifices, his tremendous power, which Larry Maharshi predicted he would have, he has made it available to all who will, and it is a relatively easy matter to perform now, if one will do it. And remember, what is the promise if you do it? You will keep the spiritual eye open. You will keep the spiritual eye open so that you can, the life force which you withdraw from the body will enter into the spiritual eye and then go to the deep spine where the 7 golden candlesticks are found, spoken of in Revelation, will go there and can mix with the great ones. And they in turn will do what? Take you to Christ's consciousness. As Jesus said in St. John, 8th chapter, 51st verse, those who keep my saying shall never taste death. Those who keep my sayings mean those who keep in the superconsciousness within, or the Christ consciousness, will never die. When you see the light of God before you and know that you are that light, how can death touch you? So you see, Kriya Yoga is very important. It is worthwhile. Those who keep my saying by the practice of Kriya Yoga, keep in my consciousness within you as God the Father, shall never see death. So I think you can agree with me that Kriya Yoga is very necessary for the future of the world. And in closing, the lesson we should learn is this. We should realize that we are not only intelligent beings. You realize that when the ego is flourishing in good shape, you know something. But we should not only realize that we are intelligent beings, but we should realize that we are divine beings, which have become attached to this worldly consciousness, this ego. And because of that, we suffer. All suffering is in that very fact. So let us realize we are not only human beings with some intelligence, but divine beings. The trouble is we are attached to this worldly vehicle, this dream of life, and that has produced all the suffering. Also, when we realize this, only when we realize this, through the practice of that sacred technique, Kriya Yoga, which God has sent through this channel, only when we realize that we are, and know it, realize and know that we are divine beings, and it is God who is in us, only then shall we be free from suffering. Now, the fastest way to realize that is through Kriya Yoga. And therefore, Kriya Yoga is very necessary and will play, no doubt, an important part in the future of the world.